This Week in Civics on Monday, May 24th. My name is Rachel Davison Humphreys, and I'm your host every week. We know at the Bill of Rights Institute that citizenship is hard work. The Bill of Rights Institute is here to help. So every week we have what's happening in civics, history, what's happening at the Bill of Rights Institute. We'd love to hear your questions. We're on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, all live every Monday morning, and we'd love to hear how you're working through these issues with your students, or yourselves or your families or your grandchildren. So like, comment, subscribe. We'd love to hear from you. So this week's episode is probably one of the things that's nearest and dearest to my heart. And that's how to have difficult conversations, and specifically looking at Socratic discussion. So we know that history and civics teachers have some of the hardest conversations with students that happen in a student's educational career. So think about it. Just this week, we've had international violence and complex issues that I talked about last week. So if you want to take a look at that at last week's episode, but the Israel-Palestine conflict is rearing its ugly head with a lot of tragedy. Then we've had racial violence with the Asian American hate crimes and criminal justice reform issues and reproductive rights in the Supreme Court. And that's all in 1 week. And most history and civics teachers, they're the front line of questioning from their community, from their students. And so we wanted to take a moment to talk about those difficult conversations, kind of how BRI thinks about them, and specifically about Socratic discussion in the classroom. So over the next few minutes, we're gonna dive into that just briefly, and then we'll give you a bunch of resources at the end if you want to take this conversation further. So at BRI, we know that hard conversations happen in every class, but especially in the humanities classes. So English and literature classes often will focus on cultural and self-awareness in their conversations. And in history and civics conversations, there are these huge implications that touch on the nature of how we treat each other with our laws. So how we have those conversations is really important. At BRI, we believe that an education in the principles of the American founding is an education in self-government. And everything we do, everything we try and do at BRI has this self-governance as the core lesson. So we think a lot about pedagogy, about how students are taught, not just what they're taught. So I wanted to give you kind of 3 quotes to frame your thinking this morning. The first is from Frederick Douglass. He says, education means emancipation. It means light and liberty. It means the uplifting of the soul of man into the glorious light of truth, the light by which men can only be made free. So he said that in The Blessings of Liberty and Education, a speech he gave in 1894. Way back in the 1830s, though, Alexis de Tocqueville, in his book Democracy in America, wrote that one cannot doubt in the United States the instruction of the people serves powerfully to maintain a democratic republic. It will be so, I think, everywhere that the instruction enlightens the mind is not separated from the education that regulates mores. Still, I do not exaggerate this advantage, and I'm still further from believing, as do a great number of people in Europe, that it suffices to teach men to read and write to make them citizens immediately. Genuine enlightenment arises principally from experience, and if one had not habituated the Americans little by little to govern themselves, the literary knowledge that they possess would not greatly help them today to succeed in it. So he's saying there that it's so important that our educational institutions create these micro communities, these microcosms where the norms and habits and behaviors of self-governing democratic people are able to be exercised. And so when BRI thinks about how to design our lessons, we're constantly thinking about how do we create that micro experience, those habits of a just society inside the classroom, so students have a small way to practice them before they become the citizens that make decisions outside of the classroom. Last but not least, many of you know, if you've watched for a while, that I'm highly influenced by Maria Montessori. And if you don't know this, Maria Montessori actually called children the forgotten citizens of the world, that they're often overlooked when it comes to thinking about policies and community development. That's why she created what she did, and she actually created it for the poorest children in Rome. That was how she developed her schools, as an education for peace. Because if you took even those with the least means and gave them powerful educations in individual liberty, they would transform the world for each other. And she said, how can we speak of democracy or freedom when from the very beginning of life we mold the child to undergo tyranny, to obey a dictator, How can we expect democracy when we have reared slaves? Real freedom begins at the beginning of life, not at the adult stage. These people who have been diminished in their power as children, made short-sighted, devitalized by mental fatigue, whose bodies have become distorted, whose wills have been broken by elders who say, your will must disappear and mine prevail. How can we expect them, when life is finished, to accept and use the rights of freedom? She said that in her book, Education for a New World. And so for a long time, there's been this democratic mission of schools going all the way back to the founders, but coming into modern focus with Dewey. There's also the history of democratic education, the work of Amy Gutman, and it looks at democratic education having four main pillars: freedom, discussion, involvement, and equality. And I want to focus for just a few moments on that discussion piece. So Socratic discussion takes many forms, many of it very low stakes, high trust, some of it very high stakes. And BRI has put together some fundamental concepts around Socratic discussion that talks about how human beings are all of all ages and abilities, are thinkers and learners who have capacity to understand in their own way. That high quality dialogue is a classroom practice dependent on interpersonal norms that take time and commitment to develop. Creating a self-governing culture of dialogue is a purposeful shared endeavor, and that we have to refine that over time. There's no method to this. Big questions don't have easy answers, but to progress in these conversations on difficult topics, we need to practice not only the principle of charity, but how to engage with others and cultivate a proper sense of intellectual humility. So as we work together to develop meaning in the texts and in our lives, if we're thoughtful and humble, and the contributions of others will contribute to a deeper and more sophisticated understanding for all. So BRI thinks a lot, like I said, about Socratic discussion and Socratic conversation, so much so that we've actually created one of our badges. So BRI put together what are called micro badges or badging credentials for educators to learn more about their practice as professionals. We offer these throughout the school year. So if you want to learn more about how to do Socratic education in your classroom, we have a new badging cohort coming up. You can go to the link in our the link below and look for the sign up for the new badging. We'll let you know when the new cohort opens up in the next couple of weeks. We also are producing every other week e-lessons. So discussing controversial topics is hard. Like putting together that lesson spur of the moment. So every other week we put together a primary source-based current events e-lesson. We have one on Second Amendment, we have one on Roe v. Wade, we have one on judicial review. So if you go into our e-lessons, you can find those there. We also produce every semester homework help videos, specifically the one on Roe v. Wade. I know that's coming up in the Supreme Court session this month. That video is an incredibly powerful starting point or review for your students before conversation. And if you wanted to go deeper with that, which we highly recommend, we also have a whole series of Supreme Court document-based questions, which are a fantastic foundation for a text-based Socratic dialogue. You can find those links below. We also produce every week, our YouTube channel is just full of discussion prompts. We have our Bridge from the Past series, which looks at a piece of art. Having a powerful conversation about a piece of art is a great way to do that practice around things that are more clear sometimes than texts. And then we also have our Close Read series, which helps you and your students read through a difficult text as a way to prompt the discussion or refresh a discussion or reflect on a discussion. So I encourage you to look at our channel for all of those. You can also find them on our website. And then there are a ton of other organizations doing great work on this. The Great Books Foundation is kind of the standard. They've been doing it for almost they've probably been doing it for about 50 years now. Touchstones Discussion Project out of Annapolis has great readers. Facing History and Ourselves, a dear friend of the Bill of Rights Institute, has a fantastic overview lesson plan for how to do Socratic in your classrooms. And then if you're looking to really dive deep and you're like, well, rearing to go before you get to our badge, there are a number of books like The Habit of Thought by Michael Strong, or Socratic Circles by Matt Copeland, or Teaching with Your Mouth Shut by Donald Finkel, or Teaching Students How to Learn by Sandra Nancy McGuire. If you have any questions about Socratic discussion, this is my life's work. I truly believe that if young people can have deep and meaningful conversations across difficulties, then we will live in a more democratic and just society. And I've devoted my life to that. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to me directly on Twitter, on LinkedIn, or if you'd like to reach out to the Bill of Rights Institute on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. We would love to hear from you. How are you doing this? What do you want from those discussions and how can we help, sign up for our badging. It's going to be an amazing cohort that teaches you how to do this in your classroom. And like, comment, and subscribe. We are here every week, and we would love to hear from you on how you're doing history, civics, and how the Bill of Rights Institute can help you help the citizens of the future. So thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your week, and I'll be here not next week because we're taking a break for Memorial Day, but I'll be here the week after.